Hello, friends. Jim here with Science Talk. Kind of a follow-up to a story I covered some time ago, where I discussed how a group of researchers from my old institute, International Arctic Research Center, determined that the so-called global warming hiatus or pause never happened. Well, another completely different group of scientists have also concluded that the global warming pause or hiatus never happened. Claims of a global warming pause in observed temperatures early this century are unfounded and lack statistical significance, so say the researchers. Okay. So, if this new team of researchers, if their work continues to gain approval and support from other researchers, it will basically leave those who have argued that the pause is real with a little bit of explaining to do. Some scientists have argued there was a pause or hiatus in the rate of global warming recorded between 1998 to 2013, thus casting doubt on the conclusions of the IPCC's report that shows the world had continued to warm. Other researchers said variously that the pause had never started or blamed changes in the trade winds. Many say that the pause or its absence were anyway irrelevant because the long-term warming trend was there, continuing unabated. Some argued that the missing, quote-unquote, missing heat had been absorbed by oceans. Well, the oceans have absorbed a lot of heat, and the oceans have warmed. Remember, the specific heat of water is much higher than air. So to heat the same volume of water versus the same volume of air, whatever that given volume is, requires far more energy input to get that water to go warmer than it does the air by whatever the same amount, 1 degree C, for example. It takes more energy to heat up a given volume of water, 1 degree C, than the same given volume of air, 1 degree C. Others have looked at volcanic discharges that may have masked sunlight. Others saying, well, it's just natural cycle. Others, that in a longer time series, the apparent slowdown becomes invisible. That's kind of the longer term. Now, an international team of climate researchers, after reanalyzing existing data and studies, says there has never been a statistically significant pause. This conclusion holds, they say, whether considering the supposed pause as a change in the rate of warming in observation or as a mismatch in rate between observations and expectations from climate models. So, these findings are published in 2 papers in the journal Environmental Research Letters. So you can go there to check them out. So basically what they're saying is there's no reason to doubt that warming continued as mainstream climate scientists argued it would, nor to doubt the methods they used, including climate modeling. But there are reasons to ask why the non-existent pause was so enthusiastically promoted by some scientists and others. So, Dr. James Risby from CSIRO Australia is the lead author of one of the studies, and he reassessed the data and put in historical context. He said, our findings show that there is little or no statistical evidence for a pause in GMST, global mean surface temperature. So there's no statistical evidence for a pause in GMST rise. Neither the current data nor the historical data support it. There was never enough evidence to reasonably draw any other conclusion. Global warming did not pause, but we need to understand how and why scientists thought it did, so that future episodes can be avoided. In other words, was there something about the analysis, something about the methodology, or perhaps mistaken interpretations? The climate research community's acceptance of a pause in global warming caused confusion for the public and policy system about the pace and urgency of climate change. That confusion, in turn, might have contributed to reduced impetus for action to prevent greenhouse climate change. The risks are substantial. Now, I wonder, and this is just speculation, but I wonder if many of these scientists who say, oh, no pause, or who said that there was a pause, were under political pressure or were having their funding threatened. I don't know. I'm speculating. But don't think it's not unreasonable to think that could happen. It is. Professor Stephen Lewandowski from the University of Bristol in UK is the lead author of the next study. And he looks at the alleged mismatch between a rate of global warming in observations and in climate models. Remember, I have stressed time and time again, it's the rate of change in the temperature and the CO2 levels and so forth. Yet, Earth has gone through warming and cooling cycles, but they did not do so at such a fast rate as for the past 150 or 60 odd years. Actually, probably about close to 170 now, when the Industrial Revolution got underway in full earnest. He said, this is Professor Lewandowski, we found the impression of a divergence, that is a divergence between the rate of actual global warming and the model projections, which was caused by various biases in the model interpretation and in the observations. It was unsupported by robust statistics. In other words, what he's saying is the models were predicting one rate and the observations indicated another rate. The rate of warming that the observation indicated was much faster than what the models were predicting, hence the divergence. If I have two lines, and let's say they both start at the origin, and one has a slope of 1.5 and the other has a slope of 2, well, you can see that as I extend the graph further and further in the positive x direction, the distance between the graphs for the same x coordinate will increase further and further as x goes to its infinity. That's basically what's happening here with the model. The authors do point out that by the end of 2017, the pause, quote unquote, was the subject of more than 200 peer-reviewed scientific articles. Many of these articles do not give any reason for, listen to this is important, the choice of start year for the pause. And the range spans from 1995 to 2004. So the scientists, those who were saying the pause took place, they could not even agree on when the supposed pause took place. That is suspicious right there. Especially to having basically a decade possibility over 10 years, right there, that's kind of leads one to say, we need to re-examine this. Professor Lewandowski says the broad range may indicate a lack of formal or scientific procedures to establish the onset of the pause. Moreover, each instance of the presumed onset was not randomly chosen, but chosen specifically because of the low subsequent warming. We describe this as selection bias. Excuse me. Some of the biases that affect the data sets and projections were known or knowable at the time. Selection bias is a major problem whenever you're doing polling or any statistical analyses. I'll give you an example. This is from the world of politics. Recent studies show that Joe Biden is the preferred candidate among Democrats for 2020. Based on what? What was the sampling method? How did you sample people? Who did you ask? Did you ask people over 60, 65, 70 years of age? Did you call them up on landlines or mobile phones? You know, if you call them up on landlines, that's a selection bias, because let's face it, younger folks, you know, people under 50, for sure, pretty much are not using landlines anymore. Everyone's got a mobile. I have a mobile. The only reason I have a landline is for my internet. I don't use the landline to make phone calls. I use my mobile. So that's an example of selection bias. You know, that your methodology, and that's basically what Professor Lewandowski is getting at. You know, what's the methodology? You creating a selection bias which skews your results and calls into question your results, your findings, your interpretations, etc. You have to be really, really careful in doing such things. Now, remember I mentioned a few moments ago, maybe some of these scientists were under political pressure. Contrarian pressure here. So when the researchers reanalyzed the data accounting for the selection bias problem, they found that no evidence for a divergence between models and observations existed at any time in the last decade. Professor Naomi Oreskes provides several possible reasons why some scientists thought the climate warming lagged behind the modeled warming. And Professor Oreskes is a co-author on the study. She's from Harvard. And basically says an explanation lies in the constant public and political pressure from climate contrarians. This may have caused scientists to feel the need to explain what was occurring, which led them inadvertently to accept and reinforce the contrarian framework. Scientists, as much as people accuse us of, we do not live in a bubble. We are prone to societal pressures and biases and so forth. Stephen Jay Gould has written about that. So they probably, you know, maybe it was a thing to keep the funding coming in. I don't know. Dr. Dan Mitchell, a climate scientist at the University of Bristol, he was not involved in the study, in either of them, said, given the fast pace of increasing climate change understanding, the conclusion of this paper will be very relevant for the inevitable future apparent climate contradictions that emerge over time, and he put the word apparent in quotes. Now, so what's the bottom line? We now have two studies. One was looking at how those 200 papers that said there was a pause, looking at the methodology. The one from the IR crew re-examined the data, went back and re-examined the data, reanalyzed it. And basically what they're saying is the hiatus never happened. The Earth continued to warm. So those who say, and I've had this argument with people, even a former student of mine, say, well, you had this global warming, you had this, your warming is BS, and you had this pause where it even got cooler, and I just looked at it and says, you're wrong. When I was hearing those people saying that, question the warming, that, it's basically espousing the point of view of this pause taking place, I was one of those saying, no, not really. Look at the data. How are you looking at the data? And as it turns out, that's what these studies have shown. They did it in a more formal, rigorous manner. I was busy with sea ice. So anyway, so anyone tells you that when you get into an argument and they say, well, there was a pause when the Earth wasn't warming, it was cooling, what have you, you can basically say, the pause never happened. Earth continued to warm. The studies shows us. Got a little more ammo in your to deal with here. So, thank you for your time. We'll talk soon. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources. So the information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you notice I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So, yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.